Is there help with fees available for this?
So we're looking at integrating with the help with fees system. So
Yeah,
what we can do is we can provide any guidance about how we're integrating with them
yeah,
as a bit of a follow up, because that is a really
yeah,
common question.
yeah, absolutely. Okay, thank you.
Okay, not a problem. Okay, so um, this slide here gives us a bit of information about what we know about our customers. So um, unlike some of the other HMCTS courts and tribunal services that are being reformed at the moment that might have very specific user groups, because probate is something that anybody can apply for. Anybody can be an executor of a will. Um, it's not sort of specific to one demographic
Okay.
of society. So what we generally find is that it's really broad ranging. So anyone can apply for probate. It's not sort of confined to one area of the population. The one specific thing, however, to bear in mind is that what we do find with our users is that because of the very emotional and stressful nature of this, a lot of our users will tend to be going through the sort of the grieving and bereavement stage of the
Yeah.
process, and it's that will probably impact on their ability to use the system,
Yeah.
rather than any sort of specific demographic background.
Yeah.
So it's really important to bear in mind that often when people are going through this, it's very emotional. People might feel as though they're over the initial sort of grieving and bereavement stage. What we find is that people often go through that sort of that initial grieving period, and they would delay going through the probate process until after then. But what we find is though, because the service naturally asks a lot of questions about the deceased, it might trigger an emotional response,
Yeah.
and that might then impact on their ability to complete this. For that reason, we actually often find that a lot of our users tend not to submit the application in one go.
Yeah.
It might be that they do it over a period of days, weeks, months, and they
Yeah.
sort of do it bit by bit as they're feeling ready to do it. Okay, so what we're going to do here is just go through a glossary of all of the common phrases that we go through. So just to make sure that everyone's clued up on all of the terminology they might come into contact with. So the will, hopefully everybody knows what a will is. So again, this is the legal document that sets out the deceased's wishes.
Yeah.
Really important at the moment that while we're in development and testing phase, there has to be a will. Okay, there has to be an original will left by the deceased, which clearly sets out that that person applying for probate was the executor of the will. It's also probably a good point for me to just say that as well. With this current version, there can be joint applications as well.
Yeah.
So if the will specified that there were more than one executor,
yeah.
Up to 4 of those executors can apply for the joint grant of probate. Okay, a codicil. So this is a legal document that amends a previous will. So if that deceased left an original will and then they wanted to make an amendment or an update to it, say they got married or decided that they maybe wanted to change who the executor was, or there was some sort of change to their wishes, they would amend that legal document with a codicil, which is just important to bear in mind, because that would then supersede the original will, and we'd need to make sure we're taking into account any updates and amendments. Okay, death certificate again should hopefully be fairly self-explanatory, but the original or a copy can be provided when applying for the grant of probate. So we would just need this as a supporting document to be sent in with the original will. And again, an inheritance tax form. So when you're applying for probate, you'll be asked that you've gone through the inheritance tax first. Okay. So really important to make sure that that's completed before probate is processed and the application submitted. Again, there's some information here about inheritance tax. Really crucial though that if the applicant has any questions about inheritance tax, that they are directed to HMRC and the inheritance tax helpline, which also exists, if they have any specific questions, rather than HMCTS. So unfortunately, they're 2 separate government departments, which is a bit frustrating. We do have a joint helpline, so we do have a really good link with the HMRC helpline, but just really crucial that if any applicant does have queries, to specifically route them that way. Yeah. Okay, so the testator is the person that's died, so that is the name of the deceased. That's the official legal terminology. Okay, and the executor is the person that is listed in the will that will be handling the estate. As I said earlier, there might be more than one executor. In fact, there often are. It's quite rare, I think, to find just one executor. Normally there's around two, so your primary executor, and then the event, say that something unfortunately happens, that executor, there would be another one listed. As I said, though, you can have up to 4 executors applying for the grant of probate. Okay, help with fees. So this is what we were saying earlier, that if the applicant does need financial help, they may be able to integrate with the help with fees system. So again, always worth checking to see if they're eligible for that. And if there are any specific questions about eligibility and the policy around help with fees, we'll make sure we direct them to the specific team that deal with that. Okay, so applicants might see this beta label on our service.
Yeah.
So again, all that means is that it's in a development and testing phase. So some of the screen content may be subject to change, but we'll always advise and we'll always alert you if we're changing anything. What's really crucial to note about this is it often means that from time to time, when we're making slight amendments and slight improvements to our service, we might take the service offline. It might only be for a couple of hours, but we'll normally try and do this overnight or something so it doesn't impact our users. But it would be worth noting that from time to time, if an applicant goes on and we're doing an upgrade of our system, they might not be able to access the service. So always just worth checking that if somebody has had problems with exactly with doing anything online. Okay, so the next bit's just going to talk us through the documentation and information required. Okay, so as we've said here, we need the original will and any codicil, so any amendments to the will of the deceased. We also need a certified copy or the original of the death certificate. So obviously if you've got the certified copy, it needs to be signed saying that this is, it's not just something you've sort of scanned in at home, and it basically needs to be readable as well, it needs to be legible. And then we also just need a copy of the inheritance tax form, which you should be able to get once you've submitted all of that.
Okay, and can I just check, I think this is the case, just to be sort of clear and make sure everybody knows, if people have phoned the telephone service and been referred to the assisted digital help in an online centre, they'll have informed them that they need to bring these things with them as well.
Exactly. So if they are looking for a face-to-face appointment, they will need to bring all of this with them to make sure that they've got all of this. And a lot of this will have information on that they'll need with them to complete the form. So it's really important they do have this with them at the time of the appointment. Okay. Exactly. So this is just saying that if there are any other executors listed in the will, even if those other executors aren't applying, they'll need to know all of the reasons for that as well. And particularly if they are applying, they'll need to have good contact with those executors. They'll need to be in touch with them, and they'll need to make sure that all of that has been sort of, I guess, agreed before the face-to-face appointment. Okay, and then here are some contact details here. So you've got the telephone number here. This links us through to Oxford Registry Office. So they're the main point of contact. They'll be able to answer any sort of general queries about probate. They're not really there to give procedural advice, only because they're not legally able to do so. But general sort of probate queries, they will be able to. And also they're the ones handling AD telephony appointments. So any queries they'll be best placed to handle those.
And then the second contact detail there, that's for any feedback on how the systems worked. So basically, if you're struggling during your appointment, talk to the helpline to try and get the appointment completed. But then any feedback after an appointment, that needs to go through to Mike, or if you want to send it through to the Good Things Foundation head office, and we'll pass that on as well. So that's the presentation part of things. I think it's time for us to have a look at the service.
Absolutely. Okay, so hopefully everybody can see this. Okay, good. So this at the moment is our demo version, but this is pretty much an accurate reflection of what your applicants will see. So once they've gone onto the Gov.uk website and they've found the Apply for Probate page, it will take an applicant to this this first screen. So this sets out a nice sort of helpful summary about what probate is. So you've got here a little definition of probate, giving you the legal right to deal with someone's property, money and possessions, so also known as the estate. So again, really making it clear that this is for England and Wales. Hopefully we won't get anybody asking about this from Scotland to Northern Ireland, but fingers crossed, if we do by mistake end up with somebody getting in touch from here, hopefully they'll have been screened out already, but yeah, really crucial. Okay, so we've got also a little bit of an explanation here about who can use this service. So as I've already explained, we need the original will, we need the death certificate, the inheritance tax form, and the applicant needs to be listed as an executor of the will. And if there are multiple executors that were listed on the will, the main executor that's applying needs to have contacted all of the other executors. Okay, and here we go, a little bit here about the fees. So again, £215 to apply if the value of the estate is over £5,000. Applying for probate is free if under £5,000. Okay. Also worth knowing here that if you do need any extra copies of the grant of probate, which you might be required, so obviously if there are multiple executors listed on the will, and if you all want a copy, or if you're planning on contacting multiple banks, say for example, then you would need to think about how many copies of the grant you'll need. So, okay, start now. Oh, sorry. One last thing, actually, really crucial for me to mention is that because we're paying online, the applicant must have a debit or credit card, so they must be able to do sort of online banking with that.
Yeah, and just whilst we pause just there, I'll just point out if people do want to continue to ask questions in the chat panel so that we can try and deal with any questions whilst we're looking at the screen that the questions do relate to, we are keeping a track on that. Perfect.
Okay, so this takes us through. So you can see some steps here. So this is basically a bit of a review screen that will keep being shown again. So you can see that you haven't been able to complete any of these yet. So the first step is going to be this step here, which is completing information about the will and inheritance tax. So first question. If we click no here, which I will do just for the sake of this, you'll be flagged with an error screen saying you can't use the online service. So really crucial that the person who died left a will. Okay, and again, if we click no on this, no to not having an original will, because as we've said already, that we must have that original will, then again, be being thrown out of the service. So first two questions, we'll have to say yes. Okay. So is there a date on the will? If we say no, we'll be taken down an alternative journey, which will ask us about the codicils. But for this purpose, we'll say yes. So it's just really crucial that we fill in this information. Okay, so we want the date that the will was signed and witnessed. Okay.
That's a long time to have a will without changing it.
Exactly, isn't it? Exactly. So yeah, so in which case we would then be presented with this question. So were there any updates made to the will? Again, if we say no, it'll just take you through a really straightforward journey. But for the purposes of this, just for any eventualities, as you said, because 1940 was a very long time ago, we'd hope that they made some updates since then. So we'll say yes. To keep it nice and straightforward, we'll say that only one update has been made. And then we'll be asked about the date on that. So we'll say yes. Okay, and we'll say that the codicil was signed. And we'll say it was on the 2nd. Say then. Okay, nice and straightforward. Okay. And has the inheritance tax form been filled in? So we need to say yes to that. If we said no, again, it would throw you out of the service at that point. So we need to make sure that yes, the inheritance tax has been completed. Okay, how was the form submitted. So there is an online service at the moment, but we'll assume that it's been done by post. Okay, and which paper form was filled in? So we will say this one. So IHT 441, most common form. Okay. So these are the most common ones. Inheritance tax. There are certain rules around that about the eligibility for applying for inheritance tax. So depending on the value of the estate, there may or may not have been inheritance tax to pay.
Yes.
But often we find that in most cases, unfortunately, there is inheritance tax to pay. So it's these forms here that are going to be the most common. Okay, so the gross value of the estate, let's just keep it straightforward. So we'll say £500,000, and the net value we'll say was 400, just to keep it nice and simple. Okay, so next question, are your names executor on the will? Again, if we say no here, we'll be thrown out of the service and again be presented with that error message. So hopefully you should always be saying yes to that. So nice bit of a summary page here, again taken to that original screen that I showed you, which is saying that you've been completed. If they do want to check their answers, they can click on that link. But just for our purposes, we won't do that. We'll go straight through to the next screen.
Okay, I'll just prompt people again, just nobody's popped any questions into the chat area just as yet, but can I just get a check that people are okay with those first few screens? They are mostly, I guess, screening screens, apart from that last one about the inheritance tax.
Interrogation tax, feels a bit like that, yeah.
Yeah, so apart from sort of checking which forms you've got, most of the others are just, yes, I am the right person to be doing this, and there's a few dates in there, but it's fairly straightforward so far, I think.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll go through to the next one. Okay. So what is your full name? So I will put my name in here. Okay, so that's making sure that it's the applicant. Okay, exactly what appears on the will or codicil. So if we say no, it may be that there might have been a slight abbreviation. So we could say no on this, and it will prompt us with a question later. Just bear in mind that we've said no, so it might ask me for exactly how it did appear on the will. Okay. Let's just put a test phone number in here. Okay, and we'll just use a test postcode. Okay, so again, it's really crucial to bear in mind that this is the address that they'll be sending the grant of probate to. Okay. Okay, so this question can be a bit confusing. So how many past and present executors are named on the will and any updates? So basically all executors that have been listed. So even if unfortunately an executor has died, we still need to make sure that they're counted. Okay, so let's say that there have been 3 executors listed on the will. Okay, so that's me. Okay, and then we've got sorry, just my typing there. Okay, so just to make sure that we've got all 3 listed. Okay, are all the executors alive? So in this instance, we'll say no, so we can show you this journey, because if we say yes, that again takes you through a very straightforward path. Yeah. If we say no, it's really crucial that we bear this in mind, because we'll be presented with some different questions. So which executors have died? So let's say executor 2 has died.
It's very sad for him.
Unfortunately, we've just killed off executor 2. Okay, so did executor 2 die before the person who died?
So that's before the person whose will we're dealing with.
Exactly. So this can get a bit confusing. It can seem as though it's a bit of a sort of a riddle or some sort of maths puzzle and working it all the sequencing out. But hopefully the person that's applying should know all of this information. So just really crucial that they're getting confused about this exactly, that we're asking about the executors and the deceased.
And I suppose this is one of those where we're going to have to be really careful when we're talking to some people, because I guess often older couples particularly die quite quickly after each other. I know I've come across that in the
Exactly,
past.
yeah. And if they're listed as executors of each other's wills,
then this question is going to come up twice.
Exactly,
yeah.
exactly. So let's say that executor 2 sadly did die before the person who died. Okay. We've now got a question about, will any of the other executors be dealing with the estate? Okay. So what we can say here is, if we said yes, that would take us through quite a straightforward path, because it would mean that we're all jointly applying for probate.
Yeah.
If we say no, it means that the other executor who hasn't died will not be dealing with the estate, in which case we're going to be asked why they're not applying for the grant of probate. So why do they not want to jointly apply for this grant? So 2 options. Okay, and again, this is some terminology. We can also make sure we add this to the glossary, because power reserved, again, probably isn't a phrase that we might come into contact with on a daily basis. So power reserved means that they don't want to apply for the grant of probate now, but in future they might also want to be able to handle anything to do with the deceased person's estate. So they might want to apply for probate in the future, further down the line, maybe in a couple of months or so, when they've decided that for whatever reason they now want to.
Okay.
However, if that executor has specifically said that they actually have no interest in applying for the grant of probate and they entirely want to give that right up, they can do that, which is known as renunciation. This clearly states here that they will need to fill in a form which will be separate, and they'll be guided how to do that. There's some really helpful advice on Gov.uk, so really crucial to bear that in mind, that if you get any questions about that, it might be worth directing them to Gov.uk, Citizens Advice, all of those sorts of services that will be able to direct them.
Good.
Okay, so if we go through this one, we'll say that they're giving up their right, just hopefully keep it quite straightforward. Okay, so what's the name of the person who died? Okay, so let's put in Test and Testy. Keep it nice and straightforward. Testy makes Testy have assets in another name. We'll say no, but if they do, it's worth mentioning that it might be a maiden name or a nickname. Just worth bearing that in mind. Might also be exactly, most cases we get with this is because they've been married, so worth just mentioning that. Okay, so we'll say no, we'll save and continue. Okay, so did they get married after the date stated on the latest codicil? This might be because it might invalidate any codicil. Okay. So if they've got married since that codicil, it's worth also bearing that in mind. So we can say yes. Okay, what's the date that they died? So let's say they died. Let's say they died a long time ago. Okay. But for example, just obviously we put 1940 to just try and keep it vaguely factual. Okay, and what was their date of birth? Let's say. Okay, this is really crucial, okay? At the time of their death, did the person who died live permanently in England or Wales? And did they intend to return to England or Wales to live permanently? We'll say the first one. Okay. If we click on that second one, in fact, actually, let's do the second one. Let's do that because it might prompt a question further down the line that's worth bearing in mind. If we do the first one, it's a nice straightforward journey. Worth mentioning though that if we do this one, it may prompt a second question further down the line, so just bear that in mind. Okay, what was the permanent address of their time of death? Okay, so let's pop that in here. Sorry, let's do a find UK address. Again, should come up with their drop down. Okay, so this is now taking us to that check your answers page. So again, we've got all the information here about the will. Again, these are sort of the screening questions. Got some inheritance tax questions here, which we filled in at the beginning. Some questions here about the executors. The applicant's information here. We've got some questions here about the other executors. So it's really crucial here. We've said no, that's because one of the executors died and the other one has renounced their rights. And then you've got here, which is all of the questions here about the deceased person. Okay, again, so that again just sort of shows that you've completed all of that. Basically, it's just another form of confirming and just reviewing all of that. So it'll take you back through to that check your answers. So we're just doubly making sure. So once we've definitely checked all of that and there's definitely no change to be made, we'll again go to the save and continue. So this is the legal statement which has replaced the oath, which would formally have to go and swear in the registry office. So instead we're presented with this. So it's worth just making sure that the applicant is fully aware that if they're clicking this, it is a legal declaration that basically acts as an oath in the same way to declare that all the information they've supplied is factually correct.
Yeah. So I suppose for centres they might need to, if they're working with people whose English is maybe not so good, might need to get someone else to just make sure that they fully understand what it is that they're ticking the box for.
Yeah, of course, absolutely. It's always crucial to make sure they do understand this. Obviously, I know you're not there to offer procedural advice. No. So again, if they do feel hesitant about this, and that's not maybe because of an assisted digital move, but maybe because of an understanding of the legalities of this, it'd be worth again redirecting them to another service such as citizen advice.
But I did notice, I think that it's there's a save and continue. So
there is.
If they're not fully sure about it, save and continue, send them to get proper advice, and then they can come back to this later.
Absolutely, exactly. It's worth mentioning that at any point they can do the save and continue and they can log back in.
Yeah.
Okay, so hopefully they'll be fine with all of that and they're declaring that all of the information that they've provided is correct and that they understand all the implications of fraud if they have deliberately provided any information incorrect. Okay, so we'd say save and continue. Okay, so this next step here is about any extra copies of the grant that may be needed. Okay, so there might be, say, 5 extra copies needed. Might be that they need to go to many different banks and all of those different services.
One for the bank, one for the mortgage, one for something else.
Yeah, exactly. Well, exactly, all of that, unfortunately. Yeah. Okay. So this is where we said about that extra question popping up. So because we said that they might intend to return to the UK, so it implied that they might have spent some time outside of the UK. Yes. So hence this question. So did they have assets outside of the UK? So if they did, so you would need special copies of the grant to be used outside of the UK. So say yes. And how many copies of the grant do you need for use outside the UK? Well, we'll just say 1. So again, it might be that they've got a nice villa in the, you know,
Costa's somewhere.
Costa del Sol, exactly, somewhere like that. Hopefully.
Don't need it today.
No, exactly. Lovely weather in the UK. Okay, again, another just check your answers page. Okay, save and continue. And then finally, once we've done all of that and we've ordered those extra copies, the next step here is to pay. And really helpfully, what we can see at the bottom here is it's making it very clear that you need to send your documents. But before you send those documents, you need to make sure that you've paid. Okay, it does a nice sort of summary page here. So application fee with 5 copies for the UK and 1 copy for use outside the UK. Right, okay. So unfortunately, because this is just a demo site, it's not actually going to let us take a payment.
But that's just going to be the standard.
Absolutely. Yeah, exactly. So hopefully your applicant would have been used to paying online for stuff before, so just using their card details.
Or even if not, that's something that we've probably seen quite a lot in our census before, so that should be fine. Okay, so I'm going to give people a few moments to pop any questions that people have into the chat panel, and whilst I'm just waiting for people to do that, just going to run through things just to make sure that I've been paying attention and that I've kind of got the things in the right order. So we've found our way to this service either through the UK or someone's given us the website address, and we land on the first page. And the first page gave us a real good summary of the information that we were going to need. So all the things you talked about in your presentation at the start, that's there in front of people's faces when they start the service. And then when we actually do make a start on the service, there's a series of questions they're kind of like screening questions, mostly with one or two just key points, like the inheritance tax form. See, I managed to say it this time, slowed down and managed to get the words out of my lord's teeth. Once you've got those questions out of the way, then it kind of saves up to that point, and you can check your answers or you can move on. The next section is asking about the person whose will you're applying to be executor of, and if there are any other executors. And it asks some questions that we probably need to be quite sensitive when people are presented with them. For example, when if the executors of someone's will have also died, that would be a particularly sensitive time, you can imagine. But they're all fairly straightforward questions. Key thing is to make sure you've got the right dates and things like that, I guess, in there.
Absolutely.
And then once you've got all of that detail in, the last section was more about so do you need any extra copies of things? Did they have any, were they England and Wales residents or wanted to come back to England and Wales? So having all of that kind of information, knowing that person's situation is kind of key for that section. Have I missed anything? Have I got that about right?
That was it. That was perfect. Well done.
Yeah,
A star.
There you go. I've passed this test, and we don't have any other questions that have come in from people. So, is there an? So we've taken people through probably a fairly common journey there, I guess. Are there any sort of journeys where you think people are they're really likely to struggle if this is the case or that's the case?
I think the only thing that I would say is that if there are multiple executors that are applying, that it's really crucial to make sure that they have been in touch and they've got all of that information to hand. So say there was another journey that we went through where this person was applying and there were, say, 3 other people also applying, you'd be asked for all of their information. So it's making sure you've got that to hand.
So having their full names, having their contact phone numbers.
Yes, exactly. Phone numbers and addresses.
Excellent. Okay. Well, I think that's been really thorough. Is there? So still waiting to see if there are any other questions. I can see someone is typing away there, so we'll just give a few moments for that to come through. Is there anything else that you really want to show people?
The only thing that I would say is that what we can follow up with is an annotated handbook. So we've got the assisted digital handbook, which is a basically step-by-step guide again of these screens, but in a PDF form.
Yeah.
And it's annotated, so it's got every single screen that I've shown you today. It's got sort of all the journeys covered. Again, so if there was an error screen presented, it would show you why that might have come up.
Okay.
And then it's got some common scenarios about what people might struggle with on those screens.
That would be wonderful as well.
I'll make sure that
we'll make sure that when we send out the recording of this session and the slide deck, we send that along. So Janet, who I think is your colleague, has just said...
so just got a helpful hint, I think, here.
Yeah, also making sure that any executors that have died are included, as this seems to be one of the things that applicants think is not needed.
Yes, really good point.
Yeah.
Yes. So what often happens is because I think the terminology can get a bit confusing, and I think, as I said, it sometimes does feel a bit like a riddle. Thinking about who all the executors are, and I think, as you said, particularly if people are died in sadly quite a quick succession of each other, it can get a bit confusing. So often we find that in applications people have failed to account for all of the executors. So it's making sure that people are definitely including all of the executors, even if they have sadly died as well.
Okay. Top tip. Thank you very much, Janet. Great.